Gymnosperms. Gymnosperms are a grouping of plants. Okay? Yesterday when I was talking through third period, they were like, so is it its own phylum? No. There are phyla in Gymnosperms, but Gymnosperm is a characteristic description of these plants. So Gymnosperms just means it's a cone-bearing plant. Okay? So these are all cone-bearing plants. Cycads, ginkgos, Neophytes, and Conifers. The ones that you are familiar with, more than likely, are the Conifers, which I've already mentioned. Again, you don't have to know a vast amount of detail on them, just being familiar with their classification and their characteristics, like that they're cone-bearing. So Cycads are probably one of the oldest Gymnosperms. We've talked about this structure right here called a strobili or a strobulus, which is its reproductive structure. Remember that as we kind of go through this section is all about the evolution of plants. So we started with plants that relied on water to reproduce. Then we got to ones that could develop vascular tissue but still needed to be close to water to reproduce. Now we're getting to plants that we did vascular with no seeds, and now we're getting to vascular with seeds. And we find that the ones with seeds are going to be the most successful at reproducing. Okay? These organisms, of course, do not need water to reproduce, but they have male and female plants. Problem with having a male-female plant, it's cool, but male plant has to find female plant, and they don't walk around. Okay? So this is, all these Gymnosperms are very few in number, so it says many of them are in danger. Oops. Here's the boy part. So this is where the cone that produces all the pollen. Girl part, the seeds. All of these are cycad. And then here you can see the ones that are grown and pollinated and ready for themselves to become a plant. The benefit of having a seed is what? Evolutionarily developing a seed gives us what advantage as a plant? Okay, it can't hibernate, but it can remain dormant. Yes. So hibernating is for animals, but it can withstand a long period of dormancy, and it can wait until conditions are favorable. Why don't the parent plants just let them plant right there? Fighting for resources. Okay? Fighting for resources. Okay, ginkgos. There's only one species of ginkgos that survives today. You and I use it as a supplement if you use it. Ginkgo biloba is a supplement used to help with memory and to increase mental acuity. So you can take supplements on Ginkgo biloba, and it's supposed to help you maintain mental alertness and help you remember things. But it has to be a long-term thing. You can't just take it right before you study for a test and then. But still, only one species left. So ginkgos. Ginkgo tree, the ginkgo seeds. Neophytes. A neophyte's still a gymnosperm, of course, but the only thing I really want you to pull from here is the fact that ephedra, which leads us to the development of ephedrine, is harvested from these gymnosperms. So ephedrine is used. What do a lot of people use ephedrine for? What is the name of it? Not to calm down. It's actually the opposite. It speeds up. A lot of people use this for weight loss, like diet pills and such. Ephedrine is in that. Neophytes. Okay, and conifers. Conifers are the ones that when we say a pine tree, this is what you think of. So conifers are your Christmas trees and so on. They have needles, and those needles are their leaves, so they're not flat, but they're hollow, and they allow that organism to store water, which is a good thing. But then they also produce a lot of sap or resin, which it's beneficial, but it's highly flammable. So you have a water conserving aspect of the plant, but you have something that makes it very flammable. But then again, in order to activate the cones, you have to catch them on fire. So it all, like, it's crazy the way it all kind of like works its way together. So pines, firs, spruces, junipers, cypress trees, all of those are big ones. Okay. Not cypress, sorry, sequoia. I straight up said cypress. Bless you. Okay, some good looking pine cones if you haven't seen any up close before. Alright, the only thing I need you to get, because you don't have to know the life cycle, like how they fertilize and such. We have talked about the development of pollen tubes though, so like when the pollen hits the plant and it kind of burrows its way in there to make its way to the ovule so it can fertilize. 2 words on here, microspores and megaspores. Microspores are referencing the antheridia, which is the pollen. So microspore is the male. Megaspore is referencing the ovule, so that's making it female. These are different terms that you're going to read in a question, and I want you to see, okay, microspore, I know we're talking about pollen or the male plant. And same thing with the megaspore. I'm going to do a quick throwback. When we talked about meiosis, which is the development of gametes, which is what's happening here, in humans, every male sperm stem cell becomes 4 sperm. Do you remember how many eggs are made from one female egg stem cell? Not 2. 1. So we start off with the stem cell, and there's 4 that are made, but 3 will end up becoming bar bodies, and we'll just have 1 egg survive. Guess what organism has that same pattern? So again, it produces 4 ovules, but only 1 is actually capable of creating another organism. I just thought that was a cool parallel and a quick throwback to something to remind you, since we are talking about reproduction, and connect those 2 concepts together. Okay, done with gymnosperms. So basically, gymnosperms take home. They're cone-bearing plants that use cones to reproduce. Their seeds, their fertilized sporophytes are within the cones, but the cones have to be activated in order to allow them to germinate. Okay? Yes?
So do all of them need fire?
Not necessarily. They don't all need fire. That's a great question. Also, these plants are not very successful because many of them have male and female plants. The problem with that is that if you just have a male plant and no female plants around, you're not going to propagate that species. They're not all like that, but many of them are. You're going to need both plants in that same area. So usually where we're going to find these plants, they've been for hundreds of years. Does that make sense? There's only 700 classified species of gymnosperms on Earth, which seems like a lot when you say 700, but it's really small compared to the fact that there are 250,000 species of flowering plants. Gymnosperms are just not really good at having babies. They've done it enough to where they're sustaining their population, but it's not growing out of control. Angiosperms, on the other hand, are growing out of control. They are really, really good at having babies, and they're good at getting animals to help them have babies. So pollinators. Okay? Angiosperms, you and I are going to divide them into monocots and dicots. On your test review, it says monocots and dicots. It says the characteristics. I'm just going to let you know that I'm going to cover a few of them, but you need to be able to look at it and it say, okay, you have a fibrous root system with a vascular bundle that is scattered. You'll need to be able to say, okay, well, I'm dealing with the monocot. And I put a chart in here. There's one in your book. The lab references it. And worst case scenario, Google a quick picture because they have those tables to differentiate them. But angiosperms is what we were going to spend the majority of the rest of this time on because they're the ones that are so successful. Bless you. Okay? It also mentions here that angiosperms have co-evolved with their animal pollinators. Do you recall what co-evolution is? They've evolved together. This is freaking amazing if you think about it. Like, certain plants have evolved to where only hummingbirds can feed on their nectar and pollinate. So the reproductive aspect of the plant has grown deeper just to accommodate the beak of that hummingbird. And this has happened as a result of random mutations that have occurred over time and turned into adaptations, which has led to evolution. It's amazing. The crazy part is, though, if something were to wipe out those flowers, the hummingbirds would be stuck. And then you would see their population go down. And vice versa, if something were to happen to those hummingbirds, the flower population would decrease because they depend on the hummingbirds to pollinate. So they've co-evolved and they've created this super successful relationship, which is amazing scientifically. But in the event that something were to happen environmentally that impacted one or the other, eventually its complement would be affected as well. As far as the anatomy of a flowering plant or an angiosperm, I did add this picture. It was not in your notes. There was a little video clip thing that wouldn't pull up, so I put this picture here. The girl part of the plant is called the carpel. So the girl part of the plant is the main aspect. All of these right here are the boy part of the plant. Boy part of the plant is called the stamen. I have the model back here. So, girl part is here in the middle, carpel. Boy part right here is the stamen. Okay? These flower petals are used only to attract pollinators. That's what a petal is for. They have different colors, sometimes different designs, so that they specifically attract only one type of pollinator. These little leaves right here that are right beneath the petals are not photosynthetic leaves. These are called sepals, and sepals are the leaf structure that holds and covers the budding or the small plant or small flower before it blooms. So the ones right underneath the petals, those are sepals. They're not actually photosynthetic. They're modified to protect that organism. This part right here attaches to this yellow part here. These are all the sperm. This is packed full of pollen. The stamen has two parts, the anther and the filament. The anther is packed full of sperm. So in this case, when the wind blows, those sperm will be, because they're pollinated by wind, they'll move. The goal, and I've already mentioned this with you, is that pollen ends up on the top of this female part and begins to develop a pollen tube so that it can come down here and fertilize this ovule, this egg. Also look at the difference in the number. We have one female aspect, but multiple male aspects. We see that pretty much in every species. But we produce far more sperm than we do eggs. Okay, so that's staying here consistent. What else? I already mentioned flowers. Fruits, the goal of a fruit, so I've already mentioned, but once more. In the event that this ovule becomes fertilized, this part right here will turn into the fruit. The fruit is to function as food for the pollinator, but also to provide nutrients and favorable conditions once it drops for that seed to germinate. Okay, so it helps also to feed that baby food plant. There. Questions on the anatomy of an angiosperm? Okay, just some pictures. Alright, we're going to go into different types of angiosperms. The main ones that the rest of this section focuses on are monocots and dicots. Mono means one, di means two. Dicots, so let me say this first. So mono one, cots is short for cotyledon, which is spelled out right here. But a cotyledon is a seed leaf, L-E-A-F, a seed leaf. So a monocot has just one seed leaf. Dicots have two seed leaves. Now, right in front of dicot on this slide, it says U. And what does U mean? True. I just want you to be ready for different versions of this word. It may say eudicot. It may say dicot. It may say eucotyledon. You are just familiar with it. Okay? I don't want you to be caught off guard. Right here it says basal angiosperm clades. Basal angiosperm clades. What does basal mean? What does it mean? It's not basal with an I. The bottom. Basal is the basement layer. So reading this topic again, basal angiosperm clades. What are angiosperms? Flowering plants. Plants that have fruits or flowers. Gymnosperms just have cones. Angiosperms have fruits or flowers. So we have basal angiosperm clades. These are at the bottom of those clades. This is where we start those. I will say, it says it in your book if you read it, but they're really not sure which angiosperms showed up first, because there's not very many fossils or anything that we can pull from. So this is just where we're starting. Good morning. Hey. Yes, sir. Jakovic? Yes, ma'am. Caleb Jakubik, Christina McDermott to Beard. Okay, yeah, so the bottom of those clades. Jakubik. Some examples, I'm sure you'll be right back. Some examples of monocots are organisms that have just one seed leaf. Wheat, corn is also a crop in Texas that we see a lot. Tulips, and then we have orchids. Just some pictures of monocots. Here are the basic characteristics of monocots in words. If you can find a picture, I do put a picture at the end of this, but if you can find a picture that shows all of these, I would reference that. Just because if it's visual, you'll get it. At least that's how I feel. Monocots are flowering plants because they're angiosperms. They have a single cotyledon, which means they have just one leaf. Their veins are usually parallel. We're talking about the veins in their leaves. The veins are parallel. All monocots, like if you pick up a piece of grass and look at it, those are parallel. That's a monocot. Grass is a monocot. When you look at a corn plant and you rip off part of the husk and you look at it, it's all parallel veins. It's a monocot. Okay? It mentions that the vascular bundles are complexly arranged. Vascular bundles is referencing xylem and phloem. The xylem and phloem in a monocot are scattered. So like they're put together in their little vascular bundles, so you have xylem, phloem, but they're just scattered. Okay? Their roots are fibrous. You're going to look at that in the lab, but a fibrous root is a root that is shallow but spreads out. It's a shallow but widespread root. It kind of just looks like a mass of of roots. Okay? Because they're angiosperms, they have fruits or flowers. In the event they have a flower, you count the number of petals, should be in multiples of 3. It's a monocot. Okay? Again, examples are lilies, orchids, yucca plants, and what was I going to say? Oh, when you go look at a plant, you pick it up, you look at various characteristics. And say, like you're going to do that back here in the back too. If you can't see a flower petal, so you don't know how many flower petals are on it, you can use another characteristic to classify it. Okay? And if it doesn't have leaves, because it's dormant, you can use something different to classify it. So these are just characteristics throughout monocots that we can use to classify them. So you may see all of them, depending on the season, and you may see like one or two. All right? So just making sure you understand that. Unicots or dicots mean they have 2 seed leaves. Characteristics: the veins are not parallel, they are scattered and form a net. They're net-like veins. And like your oak trees, they have these, like red oak trees have these big netted patterns on their leaves. That's a dicot. The vascular bundles, so the xylem and phloem, are very nice and orderly. They make this perfect little circle. So it's very easy to look at a cross-section of a stem and say, oh, that's a dicot. Most dicots have taproots. A taproot is one single large root that may have some small roots branching off of it, but a taproot is one single root. And the flower petals, if it has flowers, are in multiples of 4 and 5. If you are like me, sometimes, like when I first started learning this, I was like, okay, so if you're telling me monocots are in multiples of 3, and dicots are 4 or 5, what if it's a number like 12 or 15? It's multiple of, oh, I know it. You use a different characteristic, okay? Because, of course, I was like, well, no, I can't classify it. Anyways, and a lot of times, I mean, of course, ideally, I would like you to walk up to a flower and say, oh, sweet flower, what are you? Monocot or dicot? And be able to pull this out of your head. But the likelihood is you're not going to do that. Okay? In worst case scenario, if you do want to know and you forget everything, you just pull it out of the ground and look at its root. Does it have scattered root? Taproot? Not that you're going to remember that after this lab anyway, but just in case. All right. It says here that many angiosperms have specific pollinators. A lot of them do. We're going to look at seeds, like in not oaks. I can't think of the name right now of the tree that has a winged seed. They've evolved to just depend on the wind for pollination. But many plants have, like we mentioned just a moment ago, co-evolved with a specific pollinator. And we find them both in the same ecosystem, and they continue to benefit each other. They have a mutualistic relationship. Okay? So I already mentioned that. Highly specific flowers, or flowers that have specific pollinators. We have bees, bats. I have a picture of them on the next page. Like this flower right here, the Guerrero plant, depends strictly on bats to pollinate. So where do you think I'm going to find this flower? Yeah, somewhere where there are going to be bats close. Okay? Same thing with the hummingbird, so on, butterflies, and so on. Here, I added this picture too. 1 seed leaf, 2 seed leaves, monocots versus dicots, parallel veins versus branched or netted veins. The vascular bundles here, so the xylem and phloem, are just scattered, whereas right here, they're nice and arranged in a pattern. Flower petals in multiples of 3, flower petals in multiples of 4 or 5. You can Google this, monocot versus dicot, and get a lot of really awesome images, and just put that into your review. Make sure you know about the roots, though, too. Fibrous versus taproots. Okay? Any questions? Because this is the end of this section. All right.